All right, welcome back to the Life Legacy Podcast. Today, we have the opportunity to speak with a gem of Utah and someone I respect a lot and is someone to look up to in leadership as well as making like a sincere difference in the world and a mover and shaker in the nonprofit space. And so today, I'm honored to bring on Lindsay Hadley to the podcast.
Oh, Jackson, thank you. What a kind thing for you to say. I'm totally a words of affirmation person. I'm going to live off of those compliments for like a year. Thank you. Thank you so much. What a kind thing to say. I don't know that it's deserved, but I feel so honored. Thank you.
It's definitely earned through your life experience and everything that I've understood. And in our small interactions, I've felt like you just give a lot of love and you care about people. So I think just anyone at home, there's a lot to be learned from this. We'll dive into your world, your career, what difference you guys have been making, and as well just who you are. And so let's start with who you are. And so, Lindsay, what drives you? Like what do you care about, and what gives you that energy to work as hard as you do?
Gosh, that's a great question. What drives me? Many things I think drive me, but relationships, people. I mean, like I really do love people. I love fiercely. And this woman I met who's like a incredible woman of faith. She like can read people's mail. She gets like whisperings from the Holy Spirit and like knows things about people, almost like you'd say a clairvoyant or something, right? But she's just like, Lord is telling me. And she just, when she met me, she's like, oh my gosh, you love so lavishly. And like, I felt so known, because it's true. I think it just brings me so much joy to like be in a relationship with people. So relationships drive me the most, and then having an impact, like knowing that what we're doing matters, that it touches as many people as possible, that, diminishes suffering, or in the case of my work now with the film and entertainment industry, does it drive empathy at scale? Does it help people see themselves in others? Does it help heal things inside of people? And it's crazy because, as you walk this life and you have these values and these morals and these standards, or these like ideals of like what you care about, what you want to be a part of, what you want to be, we fall short. And sometimes our natural man, or like our wounds or our propensities or our shortcomings, keep us from fully always knowing how to step correctly. But what is a beautiful gift in my life is learning right now in this season that like earnestness matters, like intention matters. And I know my heart is really in the right place. And so I feel really buoyed up, or like I'll feel it like tailwind. My mentor like was a pilot, and he talked about waiting for tailwind in business instead of headwind, And I feel like there's a lot of tailwind from God when you have the right heart, when you have the right reasons for why. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. And I think there's just a principle of adding so much value that the monetary needs and the impact that you're making, it's going to happen. And that tailwind, that's like a cool analogy.
It's a great analogy.
I haven't really heard of.
Yeah, he talked about like waiting for tailwind, because he actually beat this guy named Chuck Yeager's flight time. He went across the United States, a certain time frame, and he beat it. And they, when they were interviewing him, like, how did you beat him? And he was just like, well, I mean, there's a couple things, but really I just waited for tailwind. And the idea that like, you get this bump organically from like where their demand signals, or what you're naturally good at, or, but I feel like, I think all through my life, I've had really good intentions, and not always, not 100% of the time, but my general frame is earnestness to try to do good and follow the light and do a good thing. I want to be good. I certainly want to be good. But it's interesting, in like a certain season of my life, like I'm realizing the more that that is the main thing on deck, like letting everything else fall, just like my heart is in the right place, getting my heart in the right place. Like it's amazing how much, God like opens doors and things happen and things soften and things work out. Even if they don't work out at first, they feel like they're used ultimately for our good. There's a lot of scriptures that talk about that, like that it's all redeemed in the atonement and in God's plan and His desire for us. It's pretty cool.
How do you take old Lindsay, where you felt like your heart wasn't in the right place, to shape it and be open to having it be in the right place? Like what is that shift?
That's such a great question. One of the places where I felt like my heart hasn't been right historically, and I still mess up with this currently, is I trick myself. I think as human beings we can be really good at self-deception, and I will like tell myself that I'm doing this for another person when really I'm doing it for love. Like say you do something really generous for somebody and you, I don't know, like give them a gift or hook them up or bring a relationship or create some kind of value in some intrinsic way. And the idea of like doing it so that they'll love me, so that I can feel like I'm worthy, or that they'll be ingratiated to me, or they'll appreciate me, or they'll stamp my approval stamp, whatever it is, to make sure that I'm not doing it from that place, but rather like where I'm wanting, to get love, but rather from love. Like, so I'm asking myself a lot in my life in the last few years, like, is this from love or for love? Is this from love or for love? And if it's from love, then there's no expectations, and then whatever happens, and there's a lot of peace behind it, even if somebody takes advantage of you or doesn't appreciate you or betrays you or whatever on the other side of that, and you're like, well, I know it was from love, so I'm good with me, and that character that's behind the actions are solid. And I think in the end, even if all it does is build confidence, there's like richness in it. So
I think one of the best gifts you can give yourself and the world is just showing up at your 100%, and the abundance of giving. And something I like a lot, and I want to go into some other things in a little bit, but there's micro giving and macro giving. And I think I've started to understand micro giving, and trying to give with the abundance of this is out of love.
Yeah.
And then the world just works, and what you give away, you can get back and things like that. But the intention behind it should just be out of love.
Yeah.
But we're all human, and the natural man is like, what about me? In all of this.
Oh yeah.
But I'm curious, your journey, you've understood, I think, on a deeper level than, like, you're in the top 0.000%, 1% of macro giving in a way of impact and influence. And I'm just curious, selfishly, like I want to understand how to do that better. And for those at home, like, Lindsay's connected with probably some of the most powerful people in the world, and that's not exaggerating. And you've done some really big things. So I'm curious to hear.
That's such a great question.
Yeah.
I've had the privilege of meeting captains of industry and really high profile people that the world knows, or have, their work has touched a lot of people, or their presence or their brand or whatever it is. And I really mean this when I say this, like, that stuff's really fun and fancy, and it's really satisfying. It's cool to see that you pull a lever and it like impacts the most possible people. Like, it's a really rewarding experience.
Yeah.
But when we talk about the natural man, we call it natural man because it's more natural. It's more natural to protect ourselves. It's more natural to defend ourselves. It's more natural to seek our own. It's more natural to preserve what we've built. Like, that's the natural propensity of our frame as human beings. And it's not necessarily wrong. Like, the ego's there for a reason. It's serving a certain functionality in this dualistic realm, but the otherworldly and the place that we come from, where we can kind of rise above that and tap into our higher selves and see ourselves in others and be truly other-centric and manage to not erase ourselves in doing that, with healthy love-based boundaries and all kinds of beautiful ways to interact with each other has mutuality. When I think about that, and I don't think there's any material difference in the quality of experience between changing one person's world. You just gave me this $100 to give away. Before this podcast, he goes, I want you to give $100 away to somebody. Such a cool idea, Jackson. And it's such a beautiful sentiment. And I'm so pumped and I love that. I'm going to do that for people. I'm going to say, hey, or give this away, because it's such a gift to be giving. I don't know truly. I know this sounds weird. Like, yeah, I've been a part of things that have saved lives and affected, billions of people on scale, some of the things that projects and outcomes of what we've done. And that's really cool. And it's hard to comprehend that. But as far as like a lived experience, I don't know of anything more rewarding than like helping the one person in front of
The
me.
one-on-one.
Yeah, like nothing's more dreamy than that. Like nothing transcends the human experience and touches parts of me that are super sacred, like that is by far the coolest, is to help somebody in front of you and them, look at you and be like, thank you. And knowing, even if they don't thank you, knowing that like you mattered to them,
Yeah.
So I'll just say that first. And I know it sounds trite, but I'm serious. Changing one person's world is as impactful and cool experientially as changing the world. And I've by no means impacted the world the way some of the people I know and have worked with have. But, a friend of mine always says, like, he's a pastor and he talks a lot about Jesus and what Jesus taught. And he's like, every time I preach a sermon, the person I'm actually trying to reach is myself. And I loved that. I was like, yeah, if serving others and showing up and doing the work, whatever the modalities in front of me, whether it's my marriage, my kids, my business, my worship, whatever it is, my learning, if I can be changing my world, like internally and getting me in a state where I'm tapped into the most precious parts of, my spirit, then that is really cool. So I think all this stuff is just like a way to, it's a great hack to help me feel purpose and feel peace and joy and gratitude. Because there's nothing like helping somebody else to help you reflect to the tenderness of like why we're here, which is to be in a relationship and to love, like that's why we're here. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for. But.
I'm not looking for any specific answer. I just want to understand, kind of how you operate in your thoughts. And I think you articulate, one of my favorite things, at least from starting to get to know you, is I think you have a skill around articulation and an intelligence of how to describe whatever you're thinking, like very well. And
thank you. That's so kind.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you something that might be a little more concrete if somebody really was like, well, how have you done these big things? So one of the things that we've tried to do in our philanthropy and like raising money and making impact is a lot of times when we're being an advocate on behalf of a cause or people, there is, because we're sacrificing so much, our time, our talents, our money, whatever, our relationship, our social equity, whatever it is, we're like bleeding out for this thing or this person, right? And oftentimes when it comes to like charity or impact or blessing people, we view it in a traditional like charitable sense that it like doesn't really benefit us back intrinsically. It does. There's all kinds of ways it benefits us back, but like in the private sector, it's a little more transactional. Like I'm getting value, you're getting value is pretty straightforward. Well, a lot of times in charity, like that value is delayed back to you or more amorphous. You're not getting directly hooked up all the time, but there's intrinsic value underneath it. But I'll just say that like one of the things that is kind of a common mistake, I think, in the nonprofit sector, and I've felt guilty of this, is like, because you're bleeding out so hard for someone and you're so passionate, like I remember when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan in August of 2023, I was just, by some random circumstances, like a part of helping try to get some families out of there. My dad had called me. He knew General Qasim, who was like a major general of the Afghan army who'd been kind of abandoned. He couldn't reach any of his U.S. contacts who were his brothers who he'd served with for 10 years. I mean, we really abandoned them, and the Taliban were coming to slaughter his family, and he was hiding like Anne Frank in closets and home, under beds and running for his life. And he called my dad, and my dad had known him as an acquaintance, and my dad called me because I'm pretty networked and I could make some phone calls, and I did. And we ended up getting this group of special forces guys there, and they were helping get families out. And this month while we were helping all these families like get out, I just remember being so, inundated with the fact that there were people like actually on the ground giving up their lives, like potentially like risking their lives, like willing to risk their lives. Whereas I was like in the comfort of my home. I didn't get a lot of sleep for that month, and we had a lot of impact. But I remember just feeling, when I started calling people because I needed to ask for money to help get the private jets and to like help get the visas and to help get accommodations and safe houses. And like, there's like hard costs to this operation.
Yeah.
And I wasn't getting paid to do it. I just did it to help and felt like it was the right thing to do. You know, oftentimes we're like, if I was around during the Holocaust, I would have saved the Jews. And it's like, stuff like that's happening. There's genocide happening all over the world, you know, like, and yes, it's not right on our doorstep always, but this was. I got a phone call and it was suddenly at my doorstep, so to speak. Proverbially.
Coming from your dad.
Yeah.
This.
Please help.
It's in your world.
So, you know, now it was like here. And so anyway, I was doing my part the best I could, but I remember kind of asking people to give, and there's people that have a lot more resources than me. And my husband and I had like emptied our bank account, like gave a major contribution towards it. And we didn't really have that money. It was pretty reckless actually. And it hurt so good. I mean, those are the best kind of giving. Like writing a check doesn't always do much for you, but when it like hurts, man, it does a lot for you. Meaning like, you know,
tell me about
meaning, oh, you just, like you're like, I'm putting my money where my mouth is, literally, you know, like this isn't my disposable income. This is like what I got, you know, and coming all in or something like that just feels very vulnerable. And it helps you prioritize, like, what do you really care about? Right. And so we were contributing, and because of that, I was calling some friends and associates who I love, who have a lot more resources than me. And then when they were like opting to not give, I remember feeling like, I don't know if, not resentment's not the right word, but kind of an entitlement. Like, what do you mean? Like, these are live, you know, like, because I was so all in and I was consecrating so much, I just felt
everyone else.
Yeah. So I'm saying like, and I was able to like correct my thinking pretty quick, because I know everybody has different things that they're elected to. And like God has, it's none of my business what they're doing with God. But it's very human when you're like, what do you mean? He's like, look at this 4-year-old boy's picture, you know, like it's very visceral. And so I think in the nonprofit sector, a lot of times we come with kind of like our hands out with almost an energy of expectancy, like this is the right thing to do. And we kind of hit people over the head with our cause, so to speak. And there's a judgment or a self-righteousness or like an energy that's just off about that, instead of it being like an invitation. And then the other part is to like, I've tried just so deeply to intrinsically create mutual benefit, so that whether it's like brokering better connections and relationships or experiences, or like finding out what they care about and what, you know, they're passionate about, what they feel, they are stewards of limited resources. Even my billionaire friends, they have limited resources at the end of the day, not very limited relative to the rest of us, but it's limited nonetheless, right? This is finite amount of money. Even, you know, Elon Musk and Bill Gates have a finite amount of money. And they have stewardship of what they feel called to. And instead of being expected and expecting nothing, like inviting and being gracious that their no may actually be the right thing. Like that energy is a big frame that's helped me. And then designing things where like they're winning, like finding out what their goals and their dreams are, not seeing them as an ATM to just transact with, but rather like, what is it they're trying to accomplish with their families and their lives, and designing things in the sector, whether it's a campaign or event where normally charities are viciously competing for limited resources. And by creating something where they all benefit, where you can play like a sophisticated choir conductor and get them to sing the same song, and then they can saturate the market all at the same time, espouse the same messaging and content, and like have a rising tide, all the boats come up. Very few people in nonprofit have that kind of abundance mentality or ability to check their logo and their ego at the door and say like, let me design something bigger for the greater cause and not make it about my overhead or my operations or my agenda. And it's cool because, you know, Jesus, he said the first shall be last and the last shall be first in all things. And I really have found that to be true. And it's crazy that I sometimes forget it, but it's like, if you know, create all this intrinsic value for whether you're your employer or your spouse or your family, like there's sometimes where it's so asymmetrical and abusive, you got to like recontextualize, but generally speaking, where value is created, value is given. And I think that's where most of the impact in my career has come from, is being able to see that and kind of take a 30,000 foot view and design things where everybody's winning and there's so much mutual benefit that it's just a better thing to sell than, hey, it's the right thing to do and you owe it to society or this person that's suffering.
It's not as incentivizing.
Yeah. I try to look at incentive shamelessly.
I think it's very intelligent. And can you give an example of how, because your approach to nonprofit is like disrupting the playbook of nonprofit efforts, and you're doing it at a high level. So can you give like an example of how that's like a story of you guys doing that?
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I can tell you a little about the Harbor Fund, which is the new thing I'm working on now. So Harbor Fund is a.
Which is the coolest thing in the world.
You're
Just
so
wait for it.
sweet. I'm so excited about it. Thank you. I'm having such a blast and feel so honored to be like the steward of this idea and this project and doing our best to try to execute it as best we can. But the idea behind Harbor Fund is it's a venture capital shaped nonprofit. So for those of you who may not know about venture capital, it's usually a fund and there's money that comes in from investors traditionally, and then those funds are deployed into different for-profit entities, and they take an equity position into those properties, and then if those projects materialize and have a return, it comes back into the fund, and they usually split some kind of like a 2 and 20 structure back to these investors, and everybody wins, and then they do round 2, and that's how venture capitals really work. They essentially diversify in a portfolio of risks instead of investing in one project or one startup. They're like in a lot of them. Yeah, and so that's a model. But what we've done is made it a nonprofit. So instead of having LPs or limited partners that are investing, they're philanthropists and they're donating, and they donate based on a specific film or TV show. So we're making kind of like the future social impact storytelling at scale. We're trying to do, the Blood Diamonds and Schindler's Lists and Hotel Rwanda's and Aaron Brockovich's of tomorrow. Like, the one that's current today that everybody loves is Love on the Spectrum. TV shows and movies and documentaries that like have a social impact to them, have a cause, and just movies that matter, that are both entertaining and have like bring awareness or education or grow empathy or teach values or whatever. So I really believe in storytelling. I think it's the most powerful thing we do as human beings. The stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and each other change the way we behave and operate. And this world is, has so many talented storytellers. And if we can harness this most powerful PR engine in the world that is Hollywood for good, that's kind of our aim. And so we take these donations, these philanthropists get a tax deduction. So kind of talking about the mutual benefit. These high net worth individuals that after they have, all their disposable income, they have all their nice cars and their second homes and whatever, because we're dealing with really high net worth people. We're not taking $30 checks from the general public, like from a grandma, like we're taking, these are people that have private foundations or donor advised funds who set aside tax exemption to do good. And if they believe in storytelling too, and film and awareness and education at scale, which I love to talk more about that, why I have such a confidence that it is meaningful. But ultimately they can, executive produce, make a donation in a Harbor Fund for that specific TV show or movie. And then they get a tax write-off, but they also get to be a part of commissioning this incredible art into the world. If you think of like, the Renaissance era when patrons would underwrite, someone like Michelangelo to give us the Sistine Chapel and we all enjoy it, like if you can give a Mona Lisa and donate it to the world, why not can you give a movie like Hotel Rwanda or whatever? Yeah. So this concept is that they're getting this tax write-off, they're getting to amplify culture. And most people, when you get to extreme wealth, after everything, it's experiences and touching culture. That's why they buy art or they get involved in the arts or underwrite, the arts or education. There's like impact, legacy, and culture is like the next thing on deck after you have like all your needs met and then some and a bunch of, disposable fun toys or whatever, right? So
why films?
Yeah. So why films? So ultimately, I'll say is then we take an equity position, it comes back, right? And then it's like a perpetual war chest for filmmaking. So all of that original investment, plus any of the principal, the original principal and the carry or the return can come back to we can back to the fund and keep investing it back into storytelling. So why films? Essentially, I've mentioned Jesus, and I'm a person of faith and bet my life on his story, but truly, like, he told parables, which were ultimately stories that shaped my life today, 2,000 years later, and billions of people around the world. And when you look at like even like pop culture icons or kings and queens of culture, like whether it was Martin Luther King or Gandhi or, Mother Teresa, those are stories. It's a story about a person, who fought against injustice peacefully, or a person who stood up for human rights in a certain way, a person who gave their life in devotion to serving others, right? These are stories, and they're just stories of people's lives. And then there's all kinds of mini stories inside of it. But just to use an example of impact, the movie Blood Diamond, have you ever seen that, Jackson?
Yeah, I love it.
Great movie. That movie literally changed the ethical supply chain for the mining industry. So De Beers changed their policies after that movie came out because there's such social awareness around, human trafficking and people being used in unethical ways at the source. And they started becoming more aware because the public demand and maybe even just one of the executives watched it. I don't know the total, mechanisms that got them to change, but we know that it directly influenced them changing their policy. There's a movie called Lion with Dev Patel, and
that one will eat your heart.
Yes, totally.
Eat your heart's kind of weird, but like
it will eat your heart out. It's true. So yeah, Nicole Kidman stars in it, and it's a true story of a young man who was adopted by a woman in Australia, and then he goes back to India to find his biological family. And it's really about how most children, 80% of all children in the global South that are in institutional care or orphanages actually have a parent. And so they're placed there mostly due to poverty, not because they're true orphans. So there's this giant myth about orphans. That's a tangent. We have a documentary inside of Harbor Fund called Orphan Myth. But the idea that he went back to find his family and, and goes on this journey, and it's very emotional of like, really like these kids belong in their families, and hopefully you have, through prevention, reunification, and adoption, you can have them with their biological family. And in the case that they can't, that's severe neglect and abuse, you get them into a permanent living family like Nicole Kidman gave him, right? But it showed the story of this plight of this incredible young man and finding his mom. And that movie, I don't think that the filmmakers even know this. In fact, it's to-do on my to-do list to connect. And I tried to reach out to Nicole Kidman's manager to tell them this, but the nonprofit UNICEF actually saw that movie, and unbeknownst to the filmmakers, created a program called the Lion Project, which they then focused on. Instead of funding and orphanages and institutions and like long-term warehousing, they instead started funding family-based solutions through like lifting people out of poverty and vocational education to keep families together.
More self-reliance
and
to fix the root of the problem.
The cause, exactly. And they would repurpose these orphanages into community centers where family members could get vocational education and lift them out of poverty, and they could get medical care and education and not have to be separated. And so, because our helping has hurt, it's created a family separation crisis in the global South, unfortunately. $3 billion a year in mostly Judeo-Christian funding goes into long-term warehousing of kids. So UNICEF, watching this movie, learns about this issue, gains awareness, names the project the Lion Project, and 1.2 million kids have been brought home to their families through this initiative. And that was because of a movie.
Wow.
So when you do something at scale, when you touch the zeitgeist of culture, when the movie Taken, I was working in anti-trafficking in 2000, let's see, it would have been 2010. Way before, today's ecosystem where it's kind of a household issue everyone knows about. And I remember going around and trying to convince benefactors and business owners to sponsor this awareness concert I was doing for anti-sex trafficking. And they were like, what is human trafficking? What is white slavery? They'd never heard of it. Like they didn't even understand it. And it was, people thought that, there was a victimless crime, that prostitution, they didn't realize, that these are young girls, they're committed offenders, very complicated. Like the movie Taken brought awareness. Now that was like an extreme bound gagged, and taken situation. And that's not how most human trafficking occurs. However, it was a talking point. I remember using it. Like, you've seen the movie Taken. They're like, oh, I'm like, well, that's happening here in Salt Lake City. People couldn't believe it, blew their minds. So that film was at the tipping spear of like awareness. The awareness is now very deep and wide. Yeah. About the anti-trafficking. And so it helps, it matters. And if anybody, anything from just like, there's a movie that a TV show that I just watched that I loved called Nobody Wants This, and Kristen Bell's in it. And it's a comedy, a rom-com, but it's about a Jewish pastor who's trying to date this non-Jewish woman, and like them trying to bridge their worlds of his faith and orthodoxy and her being, outside of the faith and her potential conversion. And it shows all this nuanced cultural stuff about Judaism. And I have Jewish friends, but I learned things. I fell in love with my Jewish friends and their culture more from it. And it used humor and storytelling and this cute romance between two fictitious characters to like draw me into the world of my Jewish friends in a moment when the world is filled with anti-Semitism and in the face of a war in the Middle East. So like this stuff matters. I really believe that at scale, that there's all kinds of ways we can help, but I feel really called and really passionate to to amplify stories that matter and that drive light and make us better as human beings.
Yeah. Well, you've talked about just Jesus and the parables and all that. I think about reading the New Testament versus even watching The Chosen.
Mm. Yeah.
Like anyone at home, The Chosen is
Great show.
it's a powerhouse to really connect you
Yes.
to I think a pretty well done version of Jesus.
Yeah.
But it like I've always felt like I have a good relationship with God, and it's like I wanted to connect more with Jesus, and so I would read and try and get that connection, which it amplified a little bit. But when I watched The Chosen, it was like a whole new level, and it's like why was his first miracle changing water to wine? Like I can't fathom why God is choosing that to be one of the first things to. And so just to have better understanding, I feel like film can really bring out that connection and relationship with the specific people, characters, or topics that matter.
Yeah, you nailed it.
And so it's beautiful work what you're doing, and you're doing it at such a high scale. For the people at home and the people that know you, there might be like some idolization of like Lindsay Hadley.
Well,
At least I feel that.
I don't. You're so
And so I want people to understand what kind of built you.
Oh,
so
wow. Yeah.
let's talk about, like, tell us about your childhood and how was it maybe even a little different than other people's childhoods of your friends.
Thanks, Jackson. Please don't idolize me. That would be a real folly. But and I'm not just trying to be falsely modest, like genuinely, like I'm very human with lots of flaws, but I will say that if they see something good in me, it's just a mirror reflecting something good in you. Like that's the truth. Like I've learned that, like when we see something in someone, we're just like, wow, I really admire that. It's just the goodness in you that you're seeing reflected back truly. Because yes, we all have beauty and goodness and benevolence and virtue in us, right? We all have these beautiful parts of our humanity. But in terms of what made me, I grew up in a small town in, if anyone knows where Camas is, like in Woodland, Utah. I grew up in this little tiny town, and very Orthodox LDS family where I didn't really have any examples of like women with careers. I had an aunt who was a counselor, like a therapist, and an aunt who drove a bus. And I think my grandma, not when I was alive, but when she was younger, taught in school. But like the women in my purview in my whole world, they were all stay-at-home mothers, and I remember for the first time meeting like a woman with like a real bona fide career that was like also like kind of at scale, which was Mrs. Fields, the Mrs. Fields Cookies dynasty. They moved in Woodland, and her daughter was my best friend. And I would go to their house, and they had extreme wealth. They had bodyguards and chefs and maids and chauffeurs and
just normal
next level, premier level lifestyle. And the next wealthy person in our community, to my knowledge, was literally the veterinarian, making like probably $60,000 a year. Like most of these people that lived in this community were entrepreneurs. They were like lumberjack guys. They were farmers and ranchers, and just really salt of the earth kind of people. And I remember just being like the juxtaposing of like lifestyle and possibility, and like what I'm not saying that I didn't necessarily crave any of that wealth. I didn't even think it was attainable for me, but I remember it just planting a seed in my mind. And she was lovely. She was a lovely mother and a lovely human being, and treated me like gold. And I remember learning that her company, like when I was a little older in my teens, I remember learning that her company went through like a version, I think it was Chapter 11 bankruptcy, some kind of bankruptcy. And I never spoke to her about it. But I remember thinking like, wow, like after building all this dynasty, all this infusion, all this value, and then it can crash, and I don't know exactly all that happened. Sometimes, like, I really don't know the particulars of what happened to Mrs. Fields Cookies, and sometimes bankruptcy is like, not that somebody else's fault. There's a calamity of errors that can happen, like I don't know the particulars. I just know that I, from afar, learned that business can be a really high contact sport. And my dad was an entrepreneur, and he traveled the world brokering deals. And we lived a little bit overseas as a result of his business. I moved to Russia right after the fall of communism, and he was being an entrepreneur in this former Soviet Union that had just like opened up to the free market for the first time. And he was like engaging.
That's a wild world.
It was nuts. Yeah. It was a really cool experience. I learned a lot about being like a global citizen, so to speak. And, just the idea that just by the by the luck of the lottery, I was born where I was, and help bring awareness.
Camas to Russia.
Yeah, crazy.
Pretty much same world.
Exactly.
Right?
And as a young girl, I lived in Hong Kong as well, and we didn't do a lot of traveling outside of that. But those experiences shaped me of seeing that people live so radically differently, and the macroeconomics of the planet, and how different cultures and geopolitics and constructs of the stories people tell. Because the Russian story prior to 1991 was the story of communism, right? And in the 60s, there was a war going on in the first world of which is going to win, socialism, communism, or capitalism, and capitalism won out. Now in this generation, fast forward to 2025, and we're having conversations about driving capitalism back towards the middle bit and not having it be so profits driven and transactional, because that actually creates destruction as well in its extremes. How can we be more conscious capitalists? How can we have more, have people be one of the bottom lines and relationship and long-term accounting? And so we're going through this as human beings, working these stories out. What's the story we want to tell about our identity, how we operate, how we do business? So I had some global experience, and it taught me a lot and made me have a bug for wanting to travel and see more of the world, And so right out of high school, I started doing humanitarian work with nonprofits as an intern, and eventually got my dream job traveling to third world countries, Mexico, Thailand, Peru, Kenya, going into the Amazon, where they'd never seen white people. And I was in charge of helping, broker projects and deals that, working with local tribesmen to build clean water wells and schools and medical dispensaries. And really young, I got this kind of
how old
experience.
were you at that point?
Yeah, 20, 21, 22 years old, 23. So I think until I was about 24, for the first 4 years of my 20s, I worked for this little nonprofit here in Utah, and I was doing all this humanitarian boots on the ground work. And there's we did a lot of these international service trips, and we would take groups of people over. And I remember seeing there were some things that were really effective, and then some things were really dysfunctional. For example, we would bring a lot of junk to the jungle. We'd bring used clothes and used goods, and then put out local commerce, because we bring a bunch of old t-shirts, and the guy who's the textile guy there, is just, totally screwed. And we're supposed to be helping the poor, and we're actually hurting some of these players. So there was things where I just saw some of this and would alert and say, hey, I'm not sure. What about this? What about that? I would challenge things. Or I saw that we would make a lot of assumptions from our Western values. We would I remember one time we put in a clean water well system in one of these little communities, and the people kept getting sick with dysentery and diarrhea and waterborne diseases. And we kept checking the water system. It was totally fine. Everything was kosher. We were why do people getting sick? And what we hadn't realized is they were using the same buckets to carry and transport the water that they were cleaning the pig pens with. Wow. So they were having water, they were having all this, infected, diseased ridden containers, and nobody had taught them that. And we just took for granted some of these common assumptions. And so I just learned so much that our helping can hurt. I saw some tragic stuff. I remember one of the worst stories I ever heard anecdotally. I didn't know this person, but I just heard the story, was in Kenya. There's a Maasai tribe, and they build their homes with dung and mud, and they create these little dome homes. And they're oftentimes, the young girls especially, but young women will fall into the fires. They'll be asphyxiated. They'll have so much smoke inhalation because there's no a chimney or no ventilation inside of the structures, that they're tending to the fire and cooking, and they'll pass out from the smoke and end up in the embers and get really hurt and sometimes killed. And so this very well-meaning contractor from America was I'm going to help. I'm going to make a makeshift chimney. And he literally created these little plastic chimneys and put them in the top of their homes, and suddenly all the ventilation was happening, and they weren't dying of smoke inhalation, and they weren't falling in the fires. And it was yay, what a good thing. He came back 3 years later, and their entire village, Jackson, was wiped out. And they were completely displaced. They were in refugee camps and completely homeless. And he was just beside himself, what happened? What's happened here? And they said, well, the only thing that kept the flies from eating our homes was the smoke. And here he was trying to help, and he completely decimated their tribe. Isn't that devastating?
Gosh.
I saw these things firsthand, and I saw my own trying to help people in business or create value, and then things go sideways, or mismanage expectations with friends as being a leader and a boss, or, not knowing what I don't know, and things going sideways in business. It's so tough. It's so lonely to be a leader, and it's so overwhelming. And I don't know. It's enough to make someone want to just like get paralytic and like not try at all, you know?
Yeah.
But I guess the road I've chosen is to be like, I'm just going to try. And then if I learn that what I'm doing is ineffective, or if I find out, if I come to the truth that what I'm doing is hurting somebody or myself, whether it's a relationship dynamic or business construct or, you know, whatever, I can pivot. And it's hard because sometimes it sneaks up on you and you're like, the cost is really big, you know? So I'm really proud of people that press forward. And I've seen people in my career that like at all costs will do what love dictates and what the truth dictates, no matter what the cost is on the other side. And it just really inspires me. It's really cool.
That's, well, first off, that story, that it's so, and I think that happens in life. Like, that story where you're trying to come in and fix a problem and you have the solution. You figured out the perfect solution, but it's an iceberg, and maybe you're solving the top of the iceberg problem, but you're actually doing a lot of detriment.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think of just our judgment that we have. The more you learn that you don't know as much as you need to learn. And I think as soon as you feel like you know it all, that's when you get, you know, hit on the head. Like there's so much to be learned, and we're not going to learn everything, but I like the intentionality of I'm going to do my absolute best and I'm going to give all that I can. But if things aren't functioning, like you need to pivot.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard realization that everyone needs to go through.
Yeah.
With your journey, what have been like some of the dreams that you've kind of checked off that you've been like, I've always wanted this, and which ones were really fulfilling and which ones did you expect them to be very fulfilling that weren't?
That's a great question. Dreams that I've checked off. Wow. So I wanted to be a film producer, you know, and a filmmaker, and I've done that now. I made my first documentary.
Woo.
And thank you. Yeah, it was super fun. I executive produced a film called Uncharitable, shameless plug. It's on Amazon and Apple, and Ed Norton's in it and a bunch of luminaries from the nonprofit space, but it addresses Dan Pallotta's work. He has a TED Talk called The Way We Think of Charity is Dead Wrong, and I raised the majority, I think 95% of the funding for this film, and helped, you know, make it come to life. And it was really cool because, you know, I didn't have any experience in the film industry. I had a lot of experience in fundraising and a lot of experience in production. And now I've been like a line producer, actually, like, which is a little more involved than just coming up with the money. You know, I like coming up with all the interviews and the team and the structure and, you know, all these things, as well as the money and the concept and all that. There's development and creative and production. And then there's like executive producing, where you kind of bring the team or the money together. And there's a whole spectrum of how that is. And I'm getting much more involved. And now with the Film Fund, we have like 8 or 9 different projects we're a part of at various degrees and various ways we help. But you know, it's really fun to have realized and seen film, but I am really excited because some of the films that the one thing is documentaries are not often seen by very many people. And so it was kind of disheartening that the movie Uncharitable didn't get seen by a ton of people, because I'm a nerd and I choose a documentary on a Friday night, but most people want to be like entertained and taken into some story that
big action.
They don't want to be like tucking heads and like be educated.
Like education.
Exactly. The best documentaries take you on that kind of a journey, but they're pretty rare to do as excellently as, you know,
as needed.
Yes. A-list actors that we're all familiar with, and like traditional stories that have all the punchlines and all the things. So it's fun because we have multiple projects that are coming out in the next, 24 months that are going to be like actual scripted narrative film that I'm excited, I would say, are like big boy movies, you know? And so it's fun to see that. And it's something I've always wanted to do. And it was really amazing because this woman named Stacey Scher and her husband, Carrie Brown, she's like a very prolific female producer, very accomplished. She did like all of Tarantino's films and Aaron Brockovich, and she did Reno 911 and Garden State and Gattaca and like some of the best movies.
Yeah,
and
you're
TV
working
shows.
with the top.
She's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, she's incredible. And she, when I was saying to her, like I had a career crush on her, she's like, you need to just go make film. She like endowed me with this like she just like was like, you're a producer, go do it. Like, it was really interesting because sometimes it just takes somebody who's been there, who's like, I see in you that you have this capability. I'm giving you permission to do it. You know, like
Yeah.
for me, that was like a big deal. It made me jump with both feet. So I'm super grateful. And then the more I go along, I'm like, oh, I'm getting educated and learning a lot. And there's really generous people that have been patient and teaching me and coaching me along the way. But yeah, like that's been really fun to make films. But you know, the thing that I've like probably most cared about in my life is having a good marriage. And I can say I have a really beautiful marriage, and it's not perfect and we're always growing, but like, man, I feel so proud and so grateful. I think it's hard to be proud because relationships are two-way. I can't take credit, but I'm so grateful for the work that we've done to choose each other, love each other, forgive each other, meet each other in mutuality, in vulnerability, and like really heal things between us, because he is like the best thing in my life. So it's funny because when I think about the films and stuff, it's really fun, and I'm, you know, excited and proud and like, yeah, check mark, and that's the thing, and I did, and it's cool, and I hope it helps people and inspires people, or does what I intended for it to do, just changes people's thinking or makes the world better. But like, yeah, again, going back to that one person's world, like, I don't know, like, you know, if this was my last day alive, like he's the person I'd want, not the people, bless their hearts, that I made the movie with, or not, you know, in the movie. It's totally useless to me, right? Like, it's my husband and my kids and my friends and my relationships. And I just feel so rich in relationship. I have such beautiful human beings around me. And so I feel, you know, I've always wanted to belong in a tribe. And I moved a little bit growing up, and I also skipped a grade, and like, I kind of always limped around, kind of not quite belonging to like a group. And I finally like have my tribe and my group, and it's so core, and it's so like deep and family, and so intimate, and so committed, and so loyal. And I'm just like overwhelmed with gratitude for these human beings that we've had the blessing to collect and do life with. And yeah, I think that I've always wanted to belong this deeply, and I feel it, and it's such a gift. I feel so grateful.
Yeah. It just all comes back to relationships.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And, that, I think that's special. I want to hear your story, how you guys met, you and your husband.
My husband and I?
Yeah.
It's a long story, but like he's from Australia, and he was visiting Mission Companion.
Pretty close to Canvas.
Yeah, exactly. Super close. Good call. Yeah, he was visiting a Mission Companion, and he was here in, I mean, this would have been like 2003 or something, and he was killing time at the dollar theaters and ran into another guy from Australia who was more of an acquaintance. He knew him from his home church, and he saw him and was like, his name is Jamie Tarr. Jamie, if you're listening, mad props. Thanks for bringing my husband and I together. But Jamie was this tall 7-foot guy, very Australian, and he was overtly living up the Australian, you know, vibe, because he was in America trying to find his future wife, which he did. He found a beautiful tall woman that was in the WNBA, which is very cool. But he was looking for a future wife, and he was like really hamming up his Australian accent. I mean, he wore like a Kubra hat, which is like, has like tassels, you know, just like corks on him, and it keeps the mozzies away, or mosquitoes. And like, he was wearing that in the winter, you know, when there's no mosquitoes, just because it was leather and it looked very Australian, you know. So he had a cane toad purse, took his money out of a dead cane toad, like, and he said crikey, which very few Australians in millennial age range say crikey. So anyway, he was just living it up and trying to get a girl, and he met my sister, and my sister was dating her now husband, and so she was like, let me palm him off on Lindsay. So I was in town visiting for Christmas break, and I was planning to go to Australia independently of ever meeting my husband as a backpacking trip in the summer with my best friend and roommate. And so when she pawned him off, she's like, hey, you're going to Australia? Like, here's this Australian guy. And she gave my number. So he called me, and he was like, can I come over and meet you? And he was coming over to my parents' house to meet me. And he just happened to run into my husband at the dollar theaters, told him I'm going to this girl's house, said, do you want to come? And my husband's like, I like girls. I'd love to come. So he came.
He's smart. He
very
sounds smart.
Very smart. Yeah. And he came in, and we had a lot of chemistry. I had a boyfriend at the time, so I wasn't thinking anything, but I just remember thinking he was super handsome and funny, and sparks flew and emotions ran high. But I wasn't entertaining anything. I just thought he was a friendly guy, and we got each other's contact information. I remember like he started AOL instant messaging, but unbeknownst to me, we only spent an hour together. But that Jamie guy saw like that we were connecting and flirting, and he was like, he used this Australian phrase. He said, you cut me lawn, Jeff, which is like, basically you're coming on my turf, and he was bothered about and I was like, well, don't bring a more handsome man to a girl's house if you next time. Anyway, no offense, Jamie. But anyway, Jamie ended up leaving and left us, and I gave Jeff a ride home. And so, on the ride home, I remember giving Jeff all my contact information and said goodbye. And apparently he called his dad that night and said, I met the girl I'm going to marry. So he knew from this 1 hour, which is super romantic now that it's reciprocated. I'm so glad he didn't tell me at the time, because the difference between kind of creepy stalker and super romantic is reciprocation, right? So anyway, we ended up keeping in touch. And 6 months later, I was supposed to go to Australia, and I got very sick with meningitis. I almost died. This is a very long story, but ended up being unable to go. There was a volcano that erupted in Fiji, and my friends were trying to get on the standby, because at the time I thought I just had the flu. And so I was like, go get on the plane. I'll meet you there in a day or two when I stopped vomiting and all this. And they were like, cool. They would try to get on the plane. If the volcano had erupted, they would have gone without me, and my husband and I wouldn't be married today. So I'm super grateful. This volcano,
shout out volcano.
Yeah, helped us out in this terrible situation. And then I was really sick, and I went to the ER, and they just gave me an anti-nausea medication and an IV, but I had meningitis, which is life-threatening if you don't get, intervention. And by the grace of God, that anti-nausea medication, I had an allergic reaction to it, which I had a seizure from it, which brought me back into the ER, which helped them catch the meningitis. And so funny enough, getting sick, the volcano erupting over Fiji, and this allergic reaction to an anti-nausea medication, these terrible things ended up giving me the best thing, most incredible, most important thing in my life, which is my husband and now my children. Because, so I when things are rough, this is good for me to remember this, because, there's some things that I'm sad about right now in my life. And it's man, they may be the best thing for me. I feel like God will use it if I'm humble and repentant and kind and trusting, it can be used for our good, all things. That's the promise. And so I'm gonna believe that. But ultimately, the journey with my husband's been so dreamy, because I ended up going 6 months after, a year after we met. And at the time when I would have gone, I had a boyfriend, and I wouldn't have I wouldn't have cheated on my boyfriend or whatever. But 6 months later, we were broken up, and we were still the boyfriend and I were still in contact, and I was considering, we were kind of in this off again, on again, dynamic. And I was I'm going to go on a mission. And anyway, so it's funny because the timing, I was available. I was more emotionally available to fall in love with my husband when I got over there. So again, timing, divine timing, things working out, trusting, the story and how it unfolds. Such an important lesson, because when we're in hard things, I've never been so sick. It was so scary and traumatic.
But that was a necessity for the right thing.
Totally, for my man to come. Yeah. And I look back, a lot of the worst things in my life brought the greatest gifts, and they still do and continue to. I don't think you have to learn through pain always, and I don't think God is the author of suffering or ugliness. I just think that it's part of the plan, and he will use it to cultivate us to become who we're supposed to be if we allow him to. And it's so important to remember that, because this life is filled with a lot of suffering, a lot of pain as a humanoid. We're gonna hurt, and I've not even tasted the cup of suffering that can happen. I've had a front row seat to, just unthinkable levels of hell on earth, and never actually been in it the way some people are. So it's easy to kind of, I don't know, pontificate about this when I'm not bearing my baby this week. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's I say this very gently. I just think my experience has been, this is my humble experience, as most people, maybe not when they're in it, but if you go further enough away from the horrible, painful thing, they will point to the gifts it gave them, the silver lining, the things that came from it. They'll, most people will be I understand the utility of it all in my life. It's not that they wouldn't want the person back or to change things per se. It's just that they also can't deny all that came from it, all that was born from whatever tragedy or whatever thing.
Well, I think one of the most beautiful paradigm shifts is when you realize that the trials and the hardships that you go through are typically some of the biggest life lessons and learnings and opportunities for progressions that you're kind of given. And sometimes it's upon your agency, and sometimes it happens to you a little bit. But Tony Robbins always talks about, life happens
Mm.
not to us, but for us.
Yeah, I love that phrase. It's
And,
beautiful. It's helped me.
and I think like with what you just explained, people at home, like everyone, if you're in a hardship
Yeah.
and the likelihood that a lot of people are going
Oh,
through
yeah.
some of the hardest things
Pretty
they've
good
gone through,
odds you're hurting somewhere.
it's really high. But there's like, we have a master painter
Yeah.
who is just, you can't see the picture that's being painted
Yeah.
in the moment ever, but always looking back, you can pinpoint miracles that seemed like horror films of your life, and they can be the most needed things that build a beautiful painting of what you're becoming.
And Jackson, you're saying that, and you've had tremendous loss with your dad. It's so young to lose your dad, and he was super close to you, huh?
Yeah, I think that's one of the ones where like through my father's experience, I don't wish that upon anyone, but that's also opened up like a new version of my life and level of living and of loving and caring and realizing how sacred beautiful moments of life are that don't seem beautiful until these types of things are taken from you. But I've also been able to have real genuine empathy to people that I would have never been able to connect with on that deeper level. Through my dad's experience, I've learned so many amazing things. And it's like, I was able to have a dad for 25 years. You talk about the orphans in or anyone that doesn't have family.
Yeah.
Like, now I understand, Yeah. And I don't want people to go through that, but at the same time, I almost want people to realize how beautiful their life is. And grief definitely teaches you so much.
What do you do with grief? Because I've lost people I love. But there's something about different qualities of grief. There's something about a young man who's missing a dad. Like something about that. It's such a critical thing, especially at your age. You're like making such important decisions. And how do you cope with grief? What advice do you have? Because we all have different forms of grief. We can grieve goals and ambitions and businesses and dreams that you have to dash. You can grieve interpersonal relationships not being beautiful the way you'd want them to be and whole, and you can grieve the realities of mortality, just like a sick body or an aging body. There's all kinds of things to grieve, but there's nothing like grieving a human being, because there's all this love and there's it feels like nowhere to put it. It's just so intense.
I felt like before my dad's passing, I'd gone through a decent amount of trials and tribulations, considering Utah and
and how young you were. Yeah.
And to give the perspective of reality of raw grief, bundle all of that up and what I experienced, and then times that by 100, and that is the feeling of losing a loved one. In my experience, and something I think about my dad every day, and it's been 3 years,
How beautiful, how honoring of your love for him.
My dad's the most, he's just a hero for me, and he wasn't a perfect hero either. He's a human hero.
The best heroes.
To answer your question though, I just was always concerned. I really wanted to dive into grief, and I've heard so many stories of people not touching their grief for 5 years, and then they blow up on their life and their loved ones. And I was always just super concerned that if I don't manage my grief and really be a part of it, I always think of a river, grief is like a river where you're going down, and if you dam it up, there's just going to become a point where it might have a little crack in it, and that grief and the power of grief can explode on other people. And I just was really, really worried that that would happen. And so what's helped me, there's been a couple main things. One is just trusting in God and his
Mhm.
plan that um, when you're handed a trial in life,
Mm.
God won't give you a trial that you aren't able to overcome.
Mm.
And so one, that can be a perspective of like, God must have a lot of trust in me
Mm.
for the willingness to let me go through something like that.
Yeah.
Also, just literally cleaving and asking for his help
Yeah.
and being vulnerable and open to the realization of how hard something like that is.
Mm.
Um, and then two, I knew as soon as that happened, the trajectory of me to depression would be very high, like the
Mm.
highest it's ever been.
Mm.
And so I thought of every natural way to avoid that.
Mm.
And so like, how can I get as much dopamine naturally as I can? So he passed away around like 11 or 12 at night, and we were up till 3. I woke up at 6 in the morning and I went to the gym because I was like really concerned that
Mhm.
I wanted to still live a happy life,
Mhm.
which was a horrible idea to go to the gym the next day. But um, so I try to do well physically
Mm.
but also just realize like it is going to be so hard, and
Mm.
you're gonna cry a lot. You're gonna regret things, and it's not like this beautiful journey for a long time. And I feel like it's a weighted thing
Mm.
that at the start it feels like you are carrying the world,
Ugh. Yeah.
and then over time that weight never goes away. You can choose to get stronger, and
Mm.
you kind of hold it, and you can like honor that weight. And
I
I
love
I
that.
think it's been like an honoring weight. And
That's
I think
beautiful.
if I wasn't holding it, it would feel like a hole more than
Yeah.
like your necklace. You get to wear that
Yeah.
because you like it and you love it. I honor that weight because I love it and I respect my dad and
Yeah.
what he's meant to my world.
Love that.
So I don't know if that hits on like the
Yeah.
advice
It's
exactly,
great.
but
I love that. I often think about the grief I have around relationships. I'm like, well, I'll pay this price for loving these people. It's worth the price, the grief.
definitely.
Um, you just, yeah, I would not love them,
Yeah.
even if whether it's somebody who passed or somebody who has opted out of relationship with me, for now, for this
Yeah.
season, for this life.
I,
Yeah, the
I was
love is
actually
worth it.
surprised. Sorry,
No, you're fine.
but I had a pretty serious relationship, and when that ended, I was surprised at how similar the feeling of losing a loved one
Oh yeah,
versus losing a relationship.
yeah.
And the only difference is like one, you can kind of choose to keep that or figure that out.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting thing that I was
Mhm.
able to learn
Yeah.
and like value love more than I would have ever in my
Yeah.
life because of what I've experienced. But
Totally. Well, there's in some ways like when you lose somebody who's living and they're still alive and you're not in unity or connection or in relationship, you're not
yeah,
together.
and it's by choice,
Yeah, whether it's a family member or acquaintance or a romantic relationship, like yeah, it's in some ways it's just so brutal because you're like, but they're here. Whereas like somebody passing, you can intellectually realize like you can't do anything about that. Whereas like somebody, like you said, is there something you could do? Could you make it better? Like that
Um,
I ruminate a lot on that because I care so much about these relationships. I want them to be whole and good. But there's yeah, again, net I would totally choose loving people
yeah,
lavishly and fiercely and pay the pain that when it doesn't work out,
include the hard.
even
Yeah.
if which in all relationship it's two-way, even the parts that are my fault.
Yep.
Like again, my intent is always for the relationship to be whole and well,
Mm.
even if I wasn't enough for it or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I I think there's just been a theme this podcast. It's life is so much more beautiful when you're giving your 100%. And I
Mm.
also think this goes with trust.
Mm.
I worked with troubled youth in the wilderness at Anasazi,
I love that
and
organization.
yeah, it's actually phenomenal. I
Incredible.
love them.
Yeah.
And something I learned there, and up to that point, I had to have people gain my trust.
Yeah.
And it would come over time, and
Huh.
I wouldn't open up about a lot of things. And in that time, I learned
Mm.
um, giving trust 100% from the get go. I love it because
You would give it.
yeah,
Yeah.
starting at
That's really sweet.
100%, and then
Yeah.
like if people disrespect your trust that you've given them,
Yeah.
yeah, cut back. You don't need but being your authentic self and being genuine in all your relationships and getting to the point where it's like if things go wrong, I would rather be burned 100 times than give
Gosh, that's great.
less trust to 1,000 people and not have the relationship or the moments that actually matter.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I needed to hear that today because my general posture is to give trust, love upfront. I don't know. It's actually easy for me. Like I see so much beauty in people. Generally, I like most everybody. Not always, not everybody, but generally,
Yeah.
it's pretty easy for me. Like I can find goodness in people and like kind of fall in love with them and like, oh, that's so cool, and I really enjoy people. And so, but then, sometimes I get hurt and like trust is broken or someone reveals whatever that I have to take in as new data. And I love that
Yeah.
because sometimes I question myself. I'm like, should I trust? I think love is unconditional, but trust is earned. And I'm learning that too. And like, I've often been like, maybe I should be careful with the trust or like how I love people or be careful. A friend of mine today was talking to me. He goes, he's like, yeah, you love people so deeply and so intense. And it's such like a drug for people that like, if you pull away, whether you just like give someone else your attention or there's some kind of, you have to reframe or there's some kind of conflict of some kind or some rupture because you do life long enough with somebody, I'm going to disappoint him. I'm definitely not perfect. And
Yeah.
so tragically, I wish I were. But he's like, it's like pulling, it's a withdrawal. And so people get really emotional. And he's like, I've seen that pattern with you. Like you just love so deeply. And then something will happen. These people just go really kind of extreme in response. And he's like, he goes, yeah, that's not normal because I think most people don't love to the extent that you do. And I thought it was a beautiful affirming way, but he goes, maybe you need to recontextualize how you love up front. And I was thinking about it. I was like, maybe he's right. And maybe that there is some wisdom into that, just seeing what people are capable of or want or ready for or whatever. But I love what you're saying because I wouldn't have the relationships I have if I didn't like skip to deeper intimacy quickly through all that trust up front and all that love. Yeah. So I think I would net take it because the gifts it's brought in my life and take some of the losses and the
I mean, there's gonna always be positive and negative things that come with the gifts of your life.
Totally.
And I definitely believe that one of your gifts you've either worked on really hard or where it came with it a little bit more was like, pure love and intent to care about someone else.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. I think that has probably been a core thing that has helped you
totally
get where you are and connect with the people that you get to connect with.
It astounds me all the time that people will take my call after all of the shenanigans and all the things that I've invited them into that don't always go perfect, that they I think my husband was saying to me, he's like, well, they just trust you. They know that you're for them. They know that you're earnest, that you mean well, and that you love them, and that you have their back. And he's like, so they trust you. And I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. Because I'm just part of it is audacity to ask and the willingness to like, risk getting rejected and failure. And part of it is, I think taking care and investing into people really deeply. I think it's a bit of all that. But also, I think somebody asked me, like, how do you do all the fundraising and asking? And I'm like, well, I think it comes from a place of knowing it's not for me ultimately. Like, there's some intrinsic value for me, like always, because I, getting paid on the project or it's something that I'm a part of and get social capital for doing or whatever thing. There's, like I said, it's never void of total selfless. I think a lot of charity is super selfish. Like I get a lot from it. I gain value. I feel my life has meaning. I feel joy.
And a process is going to be a lot easier if there's an incentive, even if it's a good thing. Like if there's a positive incentive that will make you work harder or do things better, that's a good thing.
That's great.
That's healthy.
I'm pretty shameless about it. I'm like, I feel a bit better about myself. I feel like I did something in the world that mattered.
Well, it's like, I made this money or I made this difference, but on top of that, I was able to make
Yes.
money. And if I didn't make that
Yeah.
money, then this difference would have been
Yes.
on a smaller scale.
Exactly. So yes, I agree. So that kind of, we can win while doing good, kind of thing is totally fine with me. But I'll say that, like, you know, because there's like a bigger why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not just to like sell a thing and get money. It's like there's an intrinsic real why. Like it brings me a lot of peace in going in and asking, because I'm like, I think this is as much as for you, as a gift to you, as
Mm.
to give and be a part of this and help these great people, as it is the people that are benefiting, as is me. I feel like everyone's going to win.
Yeah.
And so because that's my core belief, I think people feel that. And I think, yeah, I mean, sales is all about value creation. It's all about communicating value and all about actually intrinsically, the part about sales that everyone gets like squirmy about, that they think is so dirty, is when it's disingenuous, when it's like not, it doesn't have any there, and there's no realness to the energy or the frequency of it. But when you're like, man, this is such a gift, I'm so pumped to tell you about this. You know what I mean? I mean, we're all selling ourselves in something. Like, I have a lot of friends like, I just don't sell. I hate selling. I'm like, you are 100% selling. Like right now you're selling that you're too, benevolent to sell. Like you're selling that to yourself and me right now, like, you're like, I'm too virtuous to do that dirty work or whatever. Like we're all selling. It's constant sales to ourselves. We're selling ourselves on stories,
Totally.
right?
In relationships, like
Yeah.
everything.
What are you buying? What are you buying? Like, cause transactions, I mean, yeah. I mean, I pointed this out to my friend because we were talking about, like, the miracle of the 5 loaves and 5 fishes feeding the 5,000. It's like those apostles had to go up to somebody and be like, give me your only food. They had to sell giving me your food and trusting me with this food that for your family, and then watch what happen. Like they had to ask and sell that, to then have these. So like, I think a lot of times people demonize sales and making money and like the material world like that. And it's like, man, the scriptures are riddled with like all the levers Jesus used, like the ministry was funded by women, and funded by people and supported, and like people had jobs to be able to feed and house and clothe and support. And yeah, it's all on deck. So to me, it's always about the energy. Right. And it's just so inspiring. I think there's so many businessmen who've created so many jobs and blessed so many lives, like my boss, Mike Littledike at Capita. I remember asking him what he loves most about. He's built this registered investment agency because I work at Capita Financial Network as the director of client relations, and they have $2 billion assets under management. And he's employed all these people and helped so many people like grow their wealth. And I remember asking him, like, what's your favorite part about it? And he's like, just coming to like our company parties and seeing all these families that I'm helping and providing for from all my hard work. He's like, it just makes me feel so good. I'm like, that's so cool. That's his why. Like he gets so much joy out of that,
Which
that's amazing.
Is very fulfilling.
It's not quote charity, but it's like crazy value. That's very charitable to help other people have an honest living and take the risks he's taken, and created all that kind of value for others. It's so cool.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Someone else that's done that really well, and I kind of want to hear your journey about this, but Richard Branson has created thousands and thousands of jobs.
So many, yeah.
He's like such a phenomenal
legend
creator.
Yeah.
And I've been very inspired by him. And so I'm curious to hear your journey with Richard Branson and kind of talk to us about what happened there.
Well, I wish I had more time with Richard and knew him much better. My interactions have been beautiful. He's so generous. But I met him. I attended an event at his private island, Necker Island. I helped bring music artists to this event. And while we were there, we were having lunch and talking. And he had just taken my husband and Drew Brees, the football player, like kite surfing. And they were sitting around after having lunch. And he was like, Drew Brees is a total class act and a gentleman. And he was like, Sir Richard Branson, thank you so much. It was such a bucket list thing for me to learn how to kite surf today. And he goes, oh, I'm so glad you had a good time, Drew. And my husband, Jeff, sitting next to Richard, said like, yeah, like, Richard, what's on your bucket list? I mean, you've been to space, you're a billionaire. You're Richard, you've been knighted. Like, what's left on your bucket list? And Richard looked off kind of pensively and like really thoughtfully. And he said, I want really worthy people to leverage my brand and my platform and my name to see the best possible good, and I want to see as much of it before I die. So he's basically talking about, helping others, empowering them to do more good, like you did with give me this $100, and I just thought that was so beautiful, and I was like swooning. I'm like, I just think I fell in love with this old man, My husband's right there. I wink. No, but I was just like so impressed by his heart, and he was trying to include me, and I was sitting across from him, and he's like, and Lindsay, what about you? What's on your bucket list? And I just shamelessly went for it, Jackson. I was like, well, actually, it's to have Sir Richard Branson be my business partner, my new film fund called the Harbor Fund.
Let's
and
go.
I just took this moment and went for it. Like there was an opening, and I ran through the shoot. He was really gracious, and he laughed. He's like, well, tell me about it, And he gave me 30 minutes to pitch him what we're doing with the film fund. And he said, I made him, he listened, he was really encouraging. And he goes, oh, that sounds like an elegant solution. He's like, I made a movie years ago, and it was really fun, but I would have enjoyed it so much more if I had known I was never getting my money back, because he lost his money in this film. And he talked about how, like, how the experience was really fun. And I said, well, that's interesting, because most films don't make money, but in our harbor structure, like if the benefactor writes it off, they don't worry about the return. If there's a return, it can go back and keep on giving. But if it doesn't, it's okay. We enabled like this art out in the world, this storytelling. So anyway, he was like, well, listen, I'm not going to join any boards. I'm a little busy. I'm trying to be a good grandpa. And he said, but I'd love to host you to have like an event, like a big fundraising event here in Necker. And so he offered his island, and his again, leveraging his name and his platform is so generous. So we did that. And in February, we went and had a bunch of A-list celebrities and ultra high net worth people. Tickets were $100,000. And, we filled the island and overflow into actually surrounding islands and raised money for this film fund. We're 7 months in, and we've raised and deployed into different projects just around $6 million. And it's a little startup nonprofit. We're just getting going, but we want to raise 100 million. So it feels like we're just just scratching the surface. Yeah. So, but
in perspective, 6 million in 6 months is
pretty good.
Pretty
We're feeling great. Yeah, it feels like a lot of tailwind. We feel really blessed. But we got a long way to go, and I'm starting to recruit some of the best people I know to come help. And, we have incredible people from the industry, from Mark Burnett, who did Survivor, The Voice, Apprentice, Shark Tank, to Geraldine Dreyfus, who's based here in Utah. She's on our advisory board. She's like a titan of film. She's won more Oscars than anyone I know, and she's done over 200 documentaries. And people like Katie Couric and Jared Butler and David Oyelowo, the actor who played Martin Luther King in Selma, and people like the senior vice president of Paramount, Tony Bown, and people like Patty Jenkins, director of Wonder Woman. She's like the OG female director. These amazing people. They're all on our advisory board, helping us, supporting us.
You're bringing the Avengers together.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it feels. I'm so grateful. And then my actual team, my co-founders, Freddie Bosch and Phil Webb and Matt Peterson, they're just like 10 out of 10 humans. Like, I literally, if I only started this thing to just let them rub off on me more by being in their proximity more through work, that was the smartest thing I've ever done, because they're just like such good people. They have such amazing hearts, and they're so talented and so high capacity and high character. And so it's really fun. Business, like I said, it's a modality to become who we're supposed to be. And this has been really fun to use that with these guys. I'm learning so much from them, just how they walk so gently in the world and how they see the world. And they've been so good to me and so kind.
If one of our listeners wants to get involved in some shape or form, how could they add value to the Harbor Fund?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of ways. So if you know any high net worth people or big brands that would want to get involved in culture and storytelling and film, we'd love to meet them and connect. Or if you're one of those people, if you have, it's amazing how many people were like 1 degree connected to somebody, it's incredible relationally. Sharing your friends is unbelievable, and we'll find intrinsic value for you. We're good about that. However that is, whether getting VIP tickets to the thing or getting a credit as a producer, as associate producer, depending what you bring, there's all kinds of cool ways to give mutual benefit. If you're a filmmaker, our films, just to manage expectations, a lot of them are A-list attached, studio backed, and fully funded. They're really premier properties. So a lot of times I'm getting inundated with struggling new filmmakers with their little, independent film that has no funding. That's just kind of this nebulous thing. And that's not a great fit for us, because our biggest risk is because it's not investor dollars, it's donor dollars, and then the project never gets made. Yeah. So we're trying to come in the last bit of funding, stuff that has distribution, that has celebrities attached. So there's a lot of confidence from the benefactor. Those are the kind of projects we're coming in on. But if you have, a project like that, we'd love to hear about it. And then, when these projects come out, if you want to go to harbor-fund.org and you can see or follow us on social media, when the projects come out, buy a ticket because you're supporting, or rent it on the streaming platform or whatever, and watch it because, you're supporting like this ecosystem of storytelling that has purpose and meaning behind it. So that'd be amazing. And then, I don't know, there's a million other ideas, but, people maybe want to sponsor one of these events or get involved or host an event. There's all kinds of ways, Yeah. Thanks for asking that question.
I'm excited for the journey.
Thank you.
I think it's a killer idea, and obviously it's got great traction on it. So
thank you.
I'm excited.
Hope we can, realize it to real work. The next 24 months we'll know a lot, because a lot of these projects will be realized in the wild, and we'll see if there was returns and how sustainable the model is. And then we're in startup mode, so you're just pivoting and learning and growing pains and hustle, and it's a lot, but it's so fun. I'm like totally Twitter pated. My work is so fun, and I love the people I'm doing it with. So that's a joy. That. Yeah. Thanks for asking about it.
Yeah, of course. What is a message that you would kind of just want to scream from the mountaintops?
Wow. Yeah. It's a great, cool question. So I have 3 boys, little boys, and we have this phrase in our family that we say all the time. We have these family values that we kind of repeat, and there's kind of a few of them. But one of them we always talk about is people matter, not things. And, I don't know. I feel so grateful for knowing that in my bones that sometimes you have to be a worthy steward of things. And if someone's trying to harm you or the thing, you're running a business, you can't just, you can't just not have boundaries or require excellence or, navigate things in a fair, equitable way. It's tough because people have different opinions about what's equitable and what's fair, right? When you get down to it, we have different paradigms and perspectives, and we have to do what we think in integrity is right and fair, and do our best to do that. And, I think all the time I'm this person in front of me, whoever this person is, whether it's an employee or a donor or my business partner or my son, it's one of my sons, whoever's in front of me, it's gosh, how am I making whatever thing I'm doing more important, or whatever I'm trying to accomplish, getting a check or having an outcome, or, protecting the company, or whatever it is. It's how can I do that honors them and me? And that's win-win. Really, yeah, it's it can be hard work sometimes. It's not always really clear because this person's hurting, but they might have the wrong frame and they have a victim mentality, or they're totally off or self-deceived about whatever's going on, right? But then same thing, I might be that person that has victim mentality or self-deceived, or telling myself, a false narrative. And so working through the truth setting us free and getting to it. Cause this from your work at Anasazi. I love that organization. That's so cool. Jackson, I remember you mentioning that. I was that's so dope. But it is it's all about your way of being, right? It's all about, do you have a heart of war is what they use a lot or a heart of peace. And there's a quality to that, when someone's coming at you and attacking you and super not generous and pushing a nuke button and all that stuff. And I've had so much of that in my life. It's so difficult to keep the peace, the heart of peace. But it's the only thing that you end up respecting and loving about the situation in yourself. It's the way, but it's a narrow way and few choose it. And that makes it even more worth it. And there's been times when I haven't chosen, oh my gosh, it's gone so sideways. There's times when I choose it, it still goes sideways. Yeah. But in the end,
there's only so much you can do.
Yeah. But in the end, I've never regretted having a heart of peace towards people ever. Cause literally my heart's at peace. I used to think when the scriptures talk about you're only forgiven if you forgive, I used to think it was kind of a punitive God, well, you didn't forgive, Jackson, so I'm withholding my forgiveness from you, Lindsay. It's not.
I hope you can.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what I mean? I always thought it was kind of punitive or transactional. That's the initial frame that I took that scripture. And over time, I'm no, it's literally God's love is unconditional and his forgiveness is endless and his mercy is endless. I believe that when we put up a wall of resentment, which is to protect us, which is unforgiveness, right? Oh, I'm going to protect myself wall, not forgiving you. That wall actually keeps the love of others and of God from us. You put a wall up on your heart So if you have a heart of war, you're living with a heart of war. If you have a heart of peace, you're living with peace.
Yeah.
It's so amazing. And, there's a lot of stuff in our culture today. Like I think because we had such codependency and such erasure of self, like in the previous demographic or previous generation, like a lot of like doormats and a lot of like, I don't know, placating and capitulating not cool stuff, and in the name of being like forgiving and following Jesus. And like now we've like swung this pendulum and people are like, cut toxic people out, let them, they're dead to us, done, like boundaries, like, and it's extreme. It's very like othering. And I was speaking today, a guy named Chad Ford. He's like a peace and reconciliation, like global expert. He's written some beautiful books. And he has this book called Dangerous Love. And then the book he just released is called 7x77, I think. And it's about, or 7x70, I can't remember, but it's this beautiful book about, reconciliation and peace building and forgiveness. And he said, there's good boundaries and there's bad boundaries. And here's the test for you. If you like cut someone off or whatever in life and in business or whatever, and you run into the grocery store,
how's it gonna
if those feelings 10 years later are still with you, the ones you had when you cut them off, then you've been living in relationship with that person those are not good boundaries. Those are bad boundaries because you've been carrying that pain and that struggle. Like you didn't actually create safety for you or them. You just were avoiding. And those are bad boundaries. That's actually super toxic and not taking accountability with others, So he's like, if you run in and you feel this, if you've pulled away from somebody and you feel more love when you see them next time because you gave space, because you like made the appropriate boundaries, those are good boundaries. Like if you're like, man, I can love you better from a distance. Like I feel so much peace. That like, and I've done both. I've done boundaries where it was just like to preserve and avoid and protect. And then I've done boundaries that were like, I think we're dancing too close. I'm getting a lot of black eyes. I think I need to move back a little bit, and then I feel a lot of love and peace towards them. Anyway, I thought that was really cool. Like the grocery store test, he said. So I would just say like my big thing to shout to the rooftops is like, yeah, just like in this world where relationships are everything, that people matter and not things, keep going, keep trying. We're going to mess up. I'm saying this to myself too. Like I'm trying to reach myself, like my friend says, that, it's worth it ultimately. And it brings the right people into your orbit and it brings you into understanding the nature of God and yourself. And it's just so utterly worth it. It has such good ROI, the work of loving well. So that would be my big message.
I'm just like trying to reflect right now. It's like, all right, is there anyone, if I saw him at the grocery store, where I'd feel that? And I think for those at home, like if you need to forgive or if you need to pull a little more weight in that, so you're not avoiding the situation, like I just invite you to have, a heart of peace instead of a heart of war.
Man,
I think that's cool.
It's a gift to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's affected by it. It permeates like all space and time. It's a big deal. Yeah. It's hard to do. That's why the value is so unbelievably cool. Because it's really not for the faint of heart,
Definitely. And I think a really good leader will try to understand before trying to be fully understood.
That's right.
And that's a principle that has helped me go through like some of those harder conversations. And if you're doing stuff in life when you're really trying, I feel like hard conversations, it's just a part of life. If you have a heart that's beating, like you're going to have hard conversations.
Yeah, sure.
Unless you're just avoiding them at all costs. But just make sure that you're coming to them and trying to understand them and keeping the emotional intelligence and just listen.
Yeah.
But again, I think you need to be careful with your boundaries too. Like what you're saying, if you're taking too many black eyes, like, hey, respect yourself. Yeah. But also respect everyone.
It's kind of the other person to have them stop being abusive. It's not good to like enable abuse and capitulate abuse. Yeah. It's not cool either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. I mean, geez, this is something that I like. I don't know that you'll ever arrive. I certainly, no matter how much energy and time I spend and trying to learn better skills for conflict resolution or communications or self-actualizing or whatever. Like it just, I don't think you ever arrive. Like I wish it was, there's some people it just seems kind of easy. Like I have some friends that I'm just like, man, you're like, you just walk with so much grace and you don't have a lot of conflict, you know? And then I also think about, in some instances, they don't really they're not choosing a road where there is high conflict, you know? Like being a leader, you are going to get,
conflict.
it's a high contact sport. You're going to get a lot of elbows thrown. I mean, it's a very lonely, very difficult choice. That's why not a lot of people do it. But
And just before we wrap up, I think talking on leadership for someone that one is maybe newer to leadership or is kind of in like, you know, I want to step up and I'm going to be myself and I want to help other people in XYZ. I think you've taken the leadership role for a while in a lot of capacities. What advice would you give to say like a brand new Lindsay Hadley
for leadership to step up? No, man. I think knowing yourself is really important as a leader. Like, you know, there's a lot of like personality tests and like self-actualizing books and things, but like it's weird because like it's in leadership that you come to know yourself too. But like kind of understanding where you are now and like just gaining any skills you can to have radical honesty about self is just such a treasure trove of wisdom and indication about how to go about things, you know. And I would say one of the best ways to know ourselves, like our eyes are, my mentor would say, he's like, we have eyes looking outward, but we can't see ourselves. So surround yourself with people that will lovingly beckon you to betterment and call you out. Like the kind of friends, it takes such amazing friendship to be like, hey man, you have food in between your teeth. You know what I mean? Like when someone can call you out and give you a feedback loop about where you're off, your thinking, like how your way of being, and just like challenge you. Oh man, that is such true love. And it costs people. Like I remember Matt Peterson, we had this dynamic at work and there was this, you know, operator of a thing we were doing, this campaign, this event we were putting on. And I was so frustrated. This person was not taking any accountability and they were like an obstructionist to like getting things done, it felt like. And I was just really like, you know, frazzled and resentful and frustrated and scared. And he just was like, you're being super counterproductive, you know, like you're disenfranchising these people. Like if your goal is to keep going with these people, which you have like a little bit of time until this, you know, engagement with them ends. Like if you're going to keep going with them, then what you're doing is like not working. And it was like, it like hurt so good. It was like just to hear that, like I wasn't, you know, and he was right. I just was not being productive. I was getting so emotionally charged and offended. And yeah, I was really valid. My frustrations, I think if you lined 1,000 people up, you'd be like, that is jacked. That is whacked. What's going on? I don't think I'd be like unvalidated, but that wasn't what was important. That wasn't what was on deck. What was on deck is that I'm a leader of people and I was making these people that I was in partnership with for that season more dysfunctional by my resentment and my way of being and my interactions. And he just, I remember like me pushing, you know, like pushing back on it and just wrestling with it. And I remember this costs him a lot to tell me this, like what a good friend, and he has to pick and choose his battles even with me. And I hate that. I don't want to be that. I want to be a person that like receives that truth. And so he was really patient and kind and really generous to like get me there. And I did. I shifted my energy and my way, and it made things go right. And we had much better outcomes, I'm sure, in that interim because of his leadership and love for me to tell me, hey, you're being an a-hole, you know, like correct course. Such amazing friendship and such leadership from him. So I'm so grateful for people like that. I have a really decent amount of people like that will like, not yes, mammy. They'll be like, hey man, you like struggle, you know? And my husband's been a great person that way. He's really bold in telling me where I'm off, you know, and he's so humble. So he sees things really clearly a lot more than I've ever given him credit. I'm like, as I get older, I'm like, man, he's so wise. He really sees this, you know, I need to listen to him. Because sometimes if he says something encouraging or validating, I'll also be like, well, you have to say that, you're my husband, and write it off. When it's like, no, he has a lot of richness of awareness and insight that I just value so deeply now.
With Jeff, and and being married, it sounds like you guys have been able to have a great marriage, and I'm sure it doesn't just come at an easy
No,
cost.
yeah.
What have you learned through that journey of like growing a proper like
Partnership and
yeah,
marriage.
when we last talked,
Hmm.
you were kind of saying that you're in the best state of your
Yeah.
marriage that
Yeah.
you had been in.
It is right now. And it can always get better. Like there's just the richness of like prioritizing and being appreciative, how we have old patterns. You get, we're creatures of habit. Like the inertia of our old patterns and our wiring. Like in our brains, we have a thing called the myelin sheath, and it's like literally like where the synapses flow. And it's like, inertia of water going down a hill. Like there's a reason streams is because that's where the gravity took the water. And yeah, it takes just so much inertia to like so much willpower and so much grace of God to like correct some of that. But yeah, like I think just through time, like I'm so grateful he just kept choosing me, because for a lot of our marriage, it was really easy. Like and it's all credit to him. He's a really agreeable, thoughtful, easygoing, humble man. So you kind of have to be a monster to not get along with him. He's pretty magic. And so, that forever like was just kind of the baseline of our marriage was like easy and joyful. And like, however, there's aspects to that same strength that with fear attached is kind of a weakness, which is avoidance, right? And he could really avoid conflict, and avoiding conflict can actually, conflict delayed is conflict multiplied, Jordan Peterson says. And I totally agree with that. There's been situations where based on his paralysis or moving away from a thing that he needed to move towards, really cost me in my life and my marriage and our family and him. And he would say that if you were here. And then, my propensity to lead or fix or move towards it, like a lot of times in marriages, you have like a conflict, like conflict avoidant person or like a latent or blatant person. And we usually attract each other because they're kind of opposites attract, and it's kind of what makes us all work and have so much joy together. But then it's also like the thing that becomes the pain.
Really hard.
Yeah. It's like the big medicine in the marriage. And so like for me, like learning to like, respond differently and be more humble and to be more deferring and be more appreciative and just, even demanding more from him in certain ways and him demanding more from me, like just learning new dance moves together,
Yeah.
But it was a lot of work. Like there's a season there in our marriage, like it was so easy for someone we've been married 20 years. But there was a season where it was really hard, where I was like, I never wanted ever to divorce or anything, but I remember thinking like, if this continues, I could see how this is like off a cliff, like it was maladaptive and dysfunctional. And there's really a lot of pain. And I was like screaming out in pain, which like is never hurt people. You know what I mean? And I think that like, there's, a point where just like a very conscious, like choosing of one another, it's very powerful to choose. And you can't make the other person choose. You can choose to opt in on people. Heaven knows, like I have with like all my relationships, like I feel pretty clear that I would choose every relationship I've ever had, every human. There may be one or two that I'm like, I think that's better if we go our separate ways. But generally speaking, like it would always be my preference that we get to be together as humans. That's just like I have such a deep empathy organ in me. My friend said this to me the other day, and I was like, that's true. So why wouldn't I care about them feeling safe with me and me being safe with them? Like unity's the stuff of heaven.
Yeah.
So like, yeah. So, but to have, there's no one like your spouse. There's no, like Jesus says, to love thy neighbor. And it's like, there's no neighbor closer than our spouse, our kids, our family members, our business partners, like that's the closest neighbor. And like, yeah, his, I think he gets a lot of credit in the leadership of like continuing to choose. And, I can say, yeah, his stalwartness and like love and support in me, I couldn't have done anything that I've done. So and that's another piece of like getting people that will give you a feedback loop, but also getting people that will hold you and like support you, like be that your tailwind, like find those people, like run at them. And it's hard because some people are lonely and they don't have those people, and it doesn't always come on your time frame. But if you cultivate vulnerability and love, and you're willing to like open the kimono and be risked and be betrayed and be hurt, you will find eventually, like you said, you give that trust, you give that love, you create value first. Like if you do that,
The right people.
yeah, the right people will come. I promise. Like I promise. I think there's people right now that are like, I don't believe that. You know, I've never trusted anyone. I had a friend of mine recently say, I've never trusted anybody. He's young and he doesn't have a lot of like, he doesn't have, you know, a spouse or children or anybody. And he's like, I've never trusted anybody. And I was like, well, you know, in some ways with good reason, because like everyone's going to let you down. Like any human walking on this earth, we're lucky we have this God we believe is like perfect in love, and that God is not going to let you down. But like, yeah, everyone's going to let you down. But the cool part is you can turn to that God to make up for the deficit of those dynamics and work through it. But like, you're going to let everyone down and everyone's going to let you down. Like that is a sure thing. So how to contend with that with God is like, I think that's the alchemy that like really sets the score properly, you know? So I think giving trust and continuing to try is just so, yeah, it's so worth it. It's so powerful. I keep learning more. It's like every time I think I'm like, I think I got that lesson down, you know, it's like a whole nother layer to the proverbial onion, you know, learning how to love well.
You're super well spoken. Like most of the time when, well, like in a conversation like this, I feel like I want to add some value, and it's like,
I just monopolized all. I didn't give you space
to
talk.
No,
that's the truth.
No, you're good.
You're so sweet.
Just to wrap up, what's the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Gosh, legacy. Jeez. Probably that I want people to have felt really loved in my presence. And, you know, for those who haven't, because I have people who don't, there's, you know, I'm a villain in some people's stories. It just kills me. I think the part that kills me the most is I want them to like me because I really like them. So I'm so bummed because I'm like, but I love you. But, you know, like I feel like a golden retriever getting kicked in the teeth or something. I'm like, what do you mean? Like but aren't we friends? I wanted us to be friends. So there's a part of me that wants, you know, their validation to feel okay. And that's the part that I'm healing with God, you know, the codependent part. But there's another part of me just like is a huge fan of these people, even though they've opted out of me, like set aside all of whatever the drama or the particulars were. Like, I just love them and would love to be in relationship with them. But the thing that hurts me most about relationships being ruptured is that they haven't felt loved or safe with me. And that's not always on me. Like that may be some of what they've brought to the table too, right? In their frame or their wounds or whatever. But nonetheless, like I just want everyone to feel loved. So when I think about the legacy, like, you know, I went to a funeral the other day and I love funerals because they're usually, people are so tender. There's so much sacred thin space, you know, from heaven and earth. It's so powerful. They're rough, but they're like beautiful, you know.
They're raw.
Yeah, they're so beautiful. And this one was tough because there wasn't, it didn't have that warmth, that tenderness. I don't know what was going on, the family dynamic. It was much older person, so maybe there's more acceptance. I don't know. There was some, but it was just like not what you normally get, where you just feel like the portals of heaven are open, you know. It was a really unique situation, and I was close to one of the individuals, you know, whose family it was. So I went to support a friend. So I didn't even know the deceased person. But I remember thinking like, you know, the sweetest part about this person's funeral was people expressing how loved they felt by this individual. And I was like, I didn't like her obituary and what they said about, like, there's no accolades of any, like, you know, traditional worldly sense of any kind. And maybe she did have them and they just didn't cover them. But you know, it was the grandkids being like, you know, she always made me feel so important and so special, and she was so present, and like that was just so sweet to me. I'm like, gosh, how you make people feel like I think that stuff lasts through eternity, you know. And I literally produced a memorial of a man who like changed nations. Like, he was one of the most influential people in the finance sector in the history of the world. He literally lifted entire nations out of poverty. He was a legend, like a Gandalf and Dumbledore meets, his name was Joe Ritchie, you know, meets Yoda. He was an incredible human being. And for all of the incredible impact he's had on a global scale and all the good he did, all the sowing of goodness in the world. Yeah, the stuff that just like ate your heart out, like we were talking about, was how he made people feel like on the one-on-one relationship that's what he was missed for. That's what I miss him for. So I guess that's what I'd want, is people to know they were loved. Thanks for letting me talk about that.
Yeah.
It's cool.
No, I think you probably give yourself a harder time than you realize how much love you show. And
thanks, Jackson. That's so sweet of you.
Yeah.
You show a lot of love. You're like Care Bear Star. You're like shining bright light in your eyes and face. You're so magic.
Thank you. I think, well, just me personally, I'm grateful for our time we've had, and it's an honor to have the opportunity to just get to hear your story more.
Thank you for having me. It's so fun to chat and get asked questions about stuff that matters and be together. Thank you so much. This is so cool. I can't wait to hook somebody up with my kids. I'm going to love that. It's going to be fun. Thank you.
And, well, yeah, thank you too.
Yeah.
Those at home, I think the overwhelming feeling of this podcast is just love those around you and try and show up as your best self. Life gets hard, and just know that there's just ups and downs of life, and sometimes those low points can be the needed thing to have your high points. But everyone at home, love you guys. Been an honor to be able to have you guys be a part of this conversation. And Lindsay, serious, I'm really grateful for this time. So thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I so appreciate you, Jackson. Thank you.
Yeah.